You last about an hour before your own skin starts to feel like an enemy. By sunrise, the town is already awake and pressing itself against you. Smoke from damp firewood hangs low between timber houses. Breath clouds the cold morning air, then disappears into smells that never leave. Urine soaking into straw. Old cabbage boiled to paste. Animal dung ground into mud. Sour ale spilled in corners, and the heavy human odor of people who work, sleep, cough, and bleed in rooms that rarely empty. You do not step into this world clean. You wake inside it already wearing yesterday. Without soap, your hands keep everything they touch. Grease from supper, ash from the hearth, mucus from your nose, sweat dried into the seams of your palms. You wipe your mouth, scratch your scalp, pull on the same rough tunic, and carry your body into the day with a thin film of other lives already clinging to you. Your skin itches under wool. Your hair holds smoke. Your fingernails are dark with grime packed so tightly it feels permanent. The danger is not just filth. It is contact. Every door latch, basket handle, loaf, bucket rope, bench, spoon, and coin has passed through other hands. Some are cracked and bleeding. Some belong to a butcher, a child, a gravedigger, a woman wringing out infected linen, a man coughing into his fist before selling onions by the cart. You cannot see what stays behind. That is what makes it frightening. By midday, the town teaches you a simple lesson. Cleanliness is not a private habit here. It is a daily negotiation with scarcity, labor, weather, belief, and survival. Water must be hauled. Fuel must be burned. Time must be spent working, not scrubbing. Soap exists, but not always for you. Not always in enough quantity, and not always for the body before it is needed for cloth, tools, or trade. So dirt becomes ordinary. Grease becomes ordinary. Smell becomes ordinary. And that is the true horror. What would terrify you at first becomes background by nightfall. You eat with the same hands that touch the street. You lie down in a bed that remembers many bodies. You press your face to straw that smells faintly alive. By the end of the first day, you are not merely dirty. You are part of the town's living surface. The first thing you learn is that your body does not belong entirely to you. The town keeps claiming it back through pressure, proximity, and need. Streets are not broad open lanes where people drift politely past one another. They are narrow channels of movement, thick with carts, animals, refuse, and bodies. You brush shoulders with strangers because there is nowhere else to go. A load of firewood forces you against a wall slick with damp. A pig noses past your leg. Someone carrying fish slops dirty water over your shoes. A child runs by with a crust in one hand and a streaming nose on the other. Avoiding contact would require space, and space is a luxury the medieval town does not give you. Inside homes, the problem tightens. Rooms are small, dark, and crowded with the whole business of survival. Cooking, sleeping, mending, childbirth, sickness, storage, and prayer happen under the same roof. Sometimes in the same single room. Straw on the floor catches grease, spilled broth, lice, dust, and whatever is tracked in on boots. Bedding is shared. Blankets are reused. A bench serves for eating by day and sleeping by night. If one person comes home dirty, the dirt enters with them and settles everywhere. If one person is ill, the illness does not wait politely in a separate chamber. It breathes into the room. Markets do not help. They gather the whole town into one concentrated theater of touch. Here your hand closes around vegetables handled by dozens before you. Your fingers test a loaf, then pass coins blackened by sweat and age. The butcher wipes a blade on his apron. The ale seller fills cup after cup. Scales, baskets, cloth wraps, knives, hooks, and tabletops move from one person to another until ownership barely matters. Everything is shared by usage, if not by intention. Workforce is even closer contact. If you are poor, your labor is physical, repetitive, and public. You carry sacks, pull rope, unload wagons, wash garments, knead dough, scrape hides, muck stalls, empty waste, clean rushes, or serve in rooms full of other people's leftovers. Your hands become tools before they are ever allowed to be clean. The wealthier may command more privacy, but even they rely on servants, apprentices, cooks, wet nurses, stable hands, and maids. Their comfort rests on constant human contact too. The town is a machine of handling. You cannot simply retreat. Rent must be paid. Bread must be bought. Animals must be fed. Water must be fetched. Guild duties, household obligations, church attendance, market days, and seasonal work all pull you outward. Hunger is stronger than caution. Debt is stronger than disgust. If you stay home, you risk losing wages. If you stop trading, you stop eating. If you refuse to touch what others touch, you refuse the ordinary mechanics of living. That is why isolation belongs more to fantasy than reality. Medieval people were not careless because they were foolish. They were entangled because survival required entanglement. Every object passed through hands. Every task asked something from the skin. And in a town like this, where people live almost on top of one another, your body is never only your own. It is part of a crowded human economy that keeps going whether it is clean or not. You cannot live on caution alone. By noon, hunger forces your hand. The food itself is rarely dramatic. That is part of the danger. Your breakfast might be coarse bread, a heel gone slightly hard at the edges, dipped in weak ale or small beer because plain water is not always trusted. Later you may eat pottage, the daily stew of whatever can be stretched: onions, peas, oats, cabbage, a scrap of salted meat if fortune has turned kindly. Maybe beans boiled until they surrender into paste. On better days, there is cheese, though it sweats in the heat and carries the smell of its own making. On worse days, you eat what is available and ask fewer questions. Every bite passes through a chain of hands, surfaces, and containers that you do not control. Grain is stored in sacks and bins that attract mice, damp, and mold. Flour drifts through mills where dust settles on everything and workers wipe their faces with the same wrists that lift the meal. Dough is kneaded on boards worn smooth by years of use, then slid into ovens with peels that may also brush ash, soot, and the floor. Bread is one of the safest foods you can get. But even bread arrives carrying the history of storage, handling, and the animals that wanted it before you did. Drink is not simple either. Water comes from wells, rivers, conduits, rain barrels, or casks, and each source is only as safe as the world around it. A well can sit too close to waste. A stream can receive runoff from tanners, butchers, animals, or latrines upstream. Rainwater standing in a barrel gathers insects and whatever dust or droppings the roof offered first. Ale often feels safer because boiling and brewing give the illusion of control. And sometimes that instinct is sensible. Small beer is common for a reason. Yet ale still depends on clean vessels, good storage, and honest handling. A barrel can sour. A shared cup can travel from mouth to mouth before it reaches yours. That cup matters more than you think. Medieval eating is communal by necessity. Bowls are shared. Knives are passed. Bread trenchers soak up grease and broth, then are handled again. A family tears from the same loaf. Workers gather around the same pot. A traveler at an inn may drink after a stranger because refusing would be rude, suspicious, or simply unrealistic. The modern fantasy of sealed containers and private portions does not exist here. Your meal is also a social event, and society leaves fingerprints on everything. Storage adds its own quiet risks. Meat must be salted, smoked, or eaten quickly. Fish turns, milk sours, butter softens, cabbage rots from one leaf inward. A housewife, servant, or cook does what experience allows. But medieval kitchens are battles against time, temperature, insects, and scarcity. The smell of a food going wrong is not always enough to save you. Sometimes hunger lowers the standard. Sometimes you scrape off the worst part and boil the rest. Sometimes everyone knows the food is questionable, but wasting it would be more dangerous than gambling on it. That is the core truth of eating here. You do not choose between safe food and unsafe food. You choose between what is available and what is not. The town feeds you through 1,000 compromises, reused vessels, doubtful water, unwashed hands, smoke-dark kitchens, crowded tables, damp stores, and the constant pressure to make one more loaf, one more pot, one more day. You keep eating because the body demands fuel. Cleanliness would help, but hunger never waits for ideal conditions. So you lift the cup, tear the bread, and trust the ordinary miracles of survival more than the evidence on your own tongue. You would try to protect yourself. That is what makes it tragic. The medieval world is not ignorant of dirt. People notice smell, grease, sweat, rot, and the visible signs of neglect. They wash faces, rinse hands, comb hair, change linens when they can, and value clean cloth more than modern caricatures allow. Public bathhouses exist in many towns at various times. Wealthier households may own basins, towels, and scented waters. Soap is known, made from combinations of fat and alkali, and used above all for laundering textiles, where its usefulness is obvious. But knowing cleanliness matters is not the same as having the means to maintain it constantly on the body. Soap is labor. Water must be fetched, heated, carried, and disposed of. Fuel costs money or effort. Good soap is not infinitely available. Harsh soap can sting broken skin and strip oils from hands already cracked by cold, lime, wool, and work. A laborer cannot spend half the day scrubbing when bread depends on the next hour. So medieval hygiene becomes selective, strategic, and shaped by class. Hands may be rinsed, faces may be wiped. Linen, when changed, can do much of the daily work of freshness by absorbing sweat from the skin. But a full bodily standard of modern cleanliness is unrealistic for most people, most of the time. This is where myth begins to mislead. The old joke says medieval people simply wallowed in filth and never washed. The prettier modern correction insists they were cleaner than we think, therefore almost sensible by current standards. Both versions flatten the truth. Medieval people understood comfort, odor, dignity, and the value of washing. They also lived inside conditions that made deep cleanliness fragile and temporary. A warm bath could soothe you, but it did not change the street outside, the bedding, the clothing, the vermin, or the hands that would touch your food by evening. Medicine offered confidence, though not always protection. Illness was often explained through imbalance, corruption, and poisonous air. Bad smells were feared because foul air seemed linked to disease, and sometimes observation gave that theory emotional force. Places that stank often were dangerous, just not always for the reasons people thought. So you might carry herbs, flowers, or vinegar-soaked cloth near your nose. You might burn rosemary, juniper, or incense to cleanse a room. Doors and windows could be managed according to local habits and medical advice. Fires might be lit to purify air, even when the smoke only added one more assault to the lungs. Then come the remedies that feel active simply because they are painful. Bloodletting promises release by draining supposed excess. Purges empty a body already weakened. Ointments are rubbed onto swellings with hopeful hands. Plasters, oils, and poultices are made from herbs. Fats, resins, and minerals. Some ingredients may briefly soothe inflammation or clean a wound. Others do little. A few make things worse. But medicine here is not built around germ theory, invisible contamination, or consistent sanitation. It is built around interpreting signs in a body that seems to have fallen out of harmony with itself and the world. Religion fills the gaps that medicine cannot close. You pray. You join processions. You pin hope to relics, saints, charms, badges, blessed objects, spoken formulas, and acts of repentance. This is not stupidity. It is what people do when fear becomes too large for the hands. If disease can be punishment, then confession matters. If danger hides in the unseen, then sacred protection feels as rational as smoke or vinegar. Even the educated can move between physical remedies and spiritual ones without feeling contradiction. A physician may discuss humors, while a sufferer begs heaven not to be noticed next. That is the bitter irony of medieval protection. Much of it is understandable. Some of it is comforting. A little of it may even help at the margins through cleaner linens, gentler rinsing, herbal cleansing, or isolation when possible. But none of it gives mastery. Without reliable soap, abundant hot water, systematic sanitation, or a true understanding of contagion, every attempt at control remains partial. You can wash and still sleep in dirty straw. You can carry herbs and still touch a contaminated sleeve. You can pray, bleed, smoke the room, and scrub a bowl, yet never truly separate your body from the world that keeps reaching back for it. The town does not announce death with trumpets. It carries it quietly in cloth, fur, straw, and skin. That is what makes the threat so difficult to fight. You search for drama, for some visible border between the safe and the doomed, but medieval disease rarely grants that mercy. A blanket can look ordinary. A tunic can smell only of sweat and wood smoke. A child can seem merely tired at dawn and be raving by night. A room can be swept, aired, and prayed over, while the real danger waits in the seams of bedding, in the fleas that feed and leap, in the rats that pass through grain stores and walls, in the lice crawling close to the heat of the scalp, in the hands that adjust a collar or lift a basin. Plague is not one thing to medieval people. It is an atmosphere of sudden endings. It is rumor made bodily. It is the knowledge that a neighbor who joked in the market can be dead within days. Modern historians still debate precise pathways in some outbreaks, and not every epidemic in medieval records behaves in exactly the same way. But crowded settlements, filthy environments, vermin, shared bedding, trade routes, human closeness, and repeated contact all help create the conditions in which death moves faster than understanding. In a world without regular soap use, without consistent laundering, without disinfected surfaces, cloth itself becomes suspicious. Your clothes are never just clothes. Wool holds sweat, oils, and fleas. Linen against the skin can absorb the body's daily dirt, but linen must be washed, dried, and changed, and poor households cannot endlessly rotate fresh garments. Outer layers pick up the town. Cloaks brush walls. Sleeves pass over counters. Hems drag through muck. If a sick person has worn a garment, handled it, coughed into it, or died in it, the object keeps a terrible intimacy with the body that used it. When second-hand goods circulate, when bedding is reused, when straw is shaken out and restuffed, when the possessions of the dead do not vanish but return to life through necessity, fear settles into fabric. Then there are the fleas. Tiny, easy to ignore, difficult to escape. They live at the edge of awareness until suddenly all scratching feels ominous. You sit on a pallet and feel a bite at the ankle. You wake and slap at the neck. A dog sleeps near the fire. A rat vanishes behind a chest. These are ordinary details of medieval life, so ordinary that most days they barely register, But plague thrives on the ordinary. It does not require theatrical corruption. It asks only for enough hosts, enough crowding, enough movement, and enough opportunity to cross from one warm body to another. When sickness takes hold, terror begins in uncertainty. A headache, a fever, chills that rattle your teeth even beside a fire. The body aches as if beaten from the inside. Then swelling appears in the groin, armpit or neck, hot and hard beneath the skin, painful enough to make movement feel like punishment. Breath shortens, thirst grows, the pulse races. Some vomit, some stagger, some collapse with barely enough strength left to beg for water or prayer. Skin may darken in patches, though not always in the dramatic way later memory imagines. The sick can stink of sweat, sickness, and the sweetly foul odor of a body slipping beyond its own control. And once symptoms are visible, touch becomes morally dangerous. Someone must still bring water. Someone must lift the head, empty the basin, strip the straw, wipe the mouth, close the eyes. Care is intimate work. That is the cruelty. The most human acts become the most frightening. A wife leans over a husband. A mother cools a child's forehead. A daughter shakes out a blanket. A priest hears confession over shallow breathing. A servant carries soiled linen at arm's length and knows it makes little difference. Every act of mercy risks becoming an act of transmission, though the people involved may explain that risk through corrupted air, divine wrath, or simple bad fortune rather than invisible organisms. Corpses deepen the danger. Medieval communities know the dead must be managed quickly, but death can arrive faster than labor. Bodies may remain in houses too long when carts are delayed. Gravediggers are overwhelmed, or families are unwilling to surrender them. The room changes. Flies gather. Stench thickens. Those who handle the dead work in clothing they cannot perfectly clean and return to homes that are never fully separate from the rest of town. Burial is necessary, but burial is also contact. Breath itself becomes suspect, not because medieval people understand respiratory droplets in a modern sense, but because experience teaches them that proximity to the sick can be fatal. A close room feels wrong. The exhalations of fevered bodies seem poisonous. Shared air in churches, workshops, taverns, and sleeping rooms takes on a haunted quality. You hear coughing and instinctively turn your face away. You notice who looks flushed. You begin judging distance by dread, not by steps. Without soap, this fear sharpens because there is no clean reset. You cannot scrub the day off with confidence. Your fingers still smell of the person you helped. Your cuffs hold the odor of the lane. Your bedding keeps the memory of your own fevered sweat. You can rinse in cold water, wipe with cloth, air a garment by the fire, rub herbs into your hands, even change linen if you are lucky. But none of it grants certainty. Dirt is not merely unpleasant now. It becomes proof that the town remains on you. The speed of death does the rest. One person falls ill, then another in the same house. A shop closes. A family disappears from the pew where they always sat. The baker's boy is gone. The washerwoman is gone. The man who sold cherries by the gate is carried out at dawn. Medieval records are full of numbers, but numbers flatten the horror. What breaks you is repetition, the bell, the cart, the whispered guess that this district is worse than the other one, the rumor that the next street is untouched, though nobody truly believes in untouched streets anymore. Soon, survival becomes statistical and intimate at the same time. You judge the day by who has not yet died. You rid faces for signs you may not understand. You hesitate before touching a latch, then touch it anyway because doors do not open by prayer alone. You sleep in clothes that might betray you. You wake and check your body for pain with a discipline that feels almost devotional. That is how death rules the town. Not only through the biology of fleas, Fabric, filth, and crowded rooms. But through the collapse of confidence in ordinary contact, a hand on a shoulder, a blanket shared against cold, a bowl passed across the table, a child climbing into a parent's lap. Every gesture remains human. Every gesture also feels dangerous. And because life in the Middle Ages is built from gestures like these, the plague does not merely kill people. It turns the daily mechanics of living into a field of concealed threats. Fear changes the town long before it empties it. You begin to notice hesitation in places where life once moved automatically. A woman pauses before taking a loaf from another person's hand. A father studies a child's flushed face too long. Neighbors who once shared tools now leave them on the ground to be picked up later. A cough in a crowded room can bend every eye in one direction. Nothing dramatic needs to happen. Suspicion is enough. It alters the air more effectively than smoke. The cruelest part is that fear does not fall evenly. Those with money may retreat farther, eat better, replace bedding sooner, and command others to fetch water, wash garments, or dispose of waste, but the poor remain pressed against necessity. Laborers still carry loads, clean streets, dig graves, bake bread, scrub floors, and nurse the sick because someone must. A servant cannot simply refuse the bedchamber of an ill master. A washerwoman cannot reject infected linen if payment depends on it. A carter still hauls goods through the same gates that bring rumor and disease. Poverty keeps you available to danger. Women often bear a special weight in this world of contamination. They cook, wash, mend, carry, soothe, birth, and bury. Their labor touches the body at its most vulnerable points. Food, cloth, fever, blood, children. Caregiving looks noble from a distance. Up close, it is exhausting and filthy. It means wiping a nose, changing straw, rinsing vomit, checking swollen glands, and pretending calm while calculating who may be next. A mother cannot stop being a mother because fear has become reasonable. Children suffer differently. They do not always understand why touch has changed. They reach for comfort when comfort itself has become risky. They cry to be held by adults who are frightened of the closeness they desperately want to give. Some children are sent away if relatives can take them. Others stay in houses where illness and silence compete. They watch doors close. They hear prayers whispered in corners. They learn too early that adults can be both loving and afraid at the same time. The old, the weak, and the already sick slip fastest into invisibility. Once a household is strained, attention narrows toward whoever might still be saved. Those who recover slowly become burdens without anyone wishing to call them that. Those who cannot work lose status quickly. A body that cannot lift, fetch, sew, or earn becomes harder to center in a world run by scarcity. Medieval society values charity, but charity weakens under pressure. That is why plague and filth do more than threaten the body. They test the limits of belonging. You discover who is worth entering the room for, who is left with a bowl near the bed, who is mourned publicly, and who disappears almost without record. In such a world, survival is not only a question of strength or luck. It is also a question of whether someone is still willing to touch your shoulder when everyone has learned to fear the human hand. In the end, the town does not fail because people are careless. It fails because endurance has limits. You can work hard, wash when possible, air your bedding, change linen, avoid obvious filth, pray sincerely, and still lose. That is the final insult of life without reliable cleanliness in the Middle Ages. The system around you is too crowded, too strained, and too dependent on touch to protect any one body for long. Survival belongs partly to effort, but just as often to timing, chance, and the invisible traffic of things too small to see and too ordinary to fear until it is too late. What plague leaves behind is larger than a trail of graves. It changes how communities think about labor, cleanliness, and closeness. Fewer workers can mean higher wages in some places and panic in others. Empty houses alter the shape of streets. Religious confidence may harden, fracture, or turn inward. Old customs of care begin to carry a shadow, even when an outbreak passes. Memory remains lodged in objects and habits. A bed is not just a bed anymore. A shared cup is not just a cup. Touch itself has learned new meanings. That may be the bleakest lesson of all. Human life depends on contact. Someone must bake the bread, carry the water, wash the child, bury the dead, and hold the fevered hand. Yet the very acts that make society possible can also expose its weakness. Medieval people did not lack courage. They lived inside a material world where dirt, vermin, bad storage, crowded rooms, rough medicine, and relentless labor constantly narrowed the margin for safety. So if you ask why you would not last a week without soap in the Middle Ages, the answer is not vanity or modern squeamishness. It is that soap stands for something larger, the fragile human attempt to place a boundary between the body and the world. In medieval town life, that boundary is thin, often broken, and rarely fully yours to control. And still people rose each morning, dressed, touched, worked, fed one another, and continued. That is not cleanliness. It is resilience, stubborn and haunted,